Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit BillHowe.com. And by the Conrad Trebas Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. I'm John Carroll in for Maya Trabulsi. Many cities and organizations are busy crunching the numbers for the fiscal year's end. The County of San Diego is one of them, and this week released its calculations for the 2025 through 2027 budget. KPBS reporter Tanya Thorne breaks it down.
The County of San Diego has reached a balance in their $8 billion budget proposal for 2025 through 2027. The proposal covers 18 incorporated cities in San Diego and a large unincorporated area the county is responsible for. The biggest part of the budget is for health and human services, about 41%. About 34% is for public safety. The remainder covers environmental initiatives and general government operations. This budget proposal has a 1% increase compared to the last adopted budget, but there are some cuts. Spending is being limited and some staffing is being streamlined and reduced. Crystal Irving is president of SEIU Local 221. They represent over 14,000 workers, primarily in the public workforce sector.
But we can't just celebrate because things could be worse. The fact remains that our community has incredible needs right now, and those needs should be reflected and addressed by the county, and the proposed budget as it stands is currently insufficient.
Half of the county's $8 billion budget comes from the state and federal government for specific programs. The other half comes from property taxes, fees, and other sources of revenue. Online comments for the proposed budget are open from now until June 12th. A community open house to discuss the budget is scheduled on May 22nd at 5 p.m. at the County Operations Center. Public hearings will begin in June, with the final budget adoption happening on June 24th. Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
The cost of buying a car or getting repairs done is expected to increase considerably starting this weekend. A new round of auto tariffs take effect tonight, putting a 25% import tax on car parts. That on top of a 25% tariff on imported cars already in effect. Earlier this week, President Trump signed an executive order that would allow manufacturers to get a rebate on parts for cars made in the U.S. Still, some companies like General Motors say they're bracing for billions of dollars in losses.
We tend to think of cars as car brands making all of their cars here in the United States, which these days is just not true anymore. Even the most American cars that you can think of source a lot of their parts either from Canada or Mexico.
Edmunds analyst Joseph Yoon also told our media partner KGTV he expects the price for a new car to jump $5,000 to $10,000 by this time next year. He warned it may also cause insurance premiums to go up since it would be more expensive to buy replacement parts. The Trump administration says it will enforce English language proficiency requirements for truck drivers. KPBS video journalist Matthew Bowler went to the East Tijuana neighborhood of Otay to see what Mexican truck drivers think about the new executive order.
Otay Mesa is the largest commercial crossing in California, according to Sandag. More than $20 billion in merchandise crosses the border each year.
To give you an idea, this road receives 4,000 trucks per day. That means 4,000 trucks going north, 4,000 trucks coming south, 8,000 trucks per day, about $440 million trade per day.
That's Israel Delgado Vallejo from the Mexican Trucking Association. He says he represents more than 12,000 Tijuana truckers. Drivers in his association deliver cargo all over the United States.
But now with this new the new order that is being signed by the U.S. government, that really means that drivers are scared to cross the border.
The Trump administration says English language proficiency is a necessary safety requirement for drivers.
We got drivers driving for the last 30 years with no accidents in the roads.
Delgado says his association will help roll out new, more comprehensive language training program.
What we're doing as an association is trying to get digital programs for them so they can drive and practice.
With more than 700,000 Mexican truckers crossing the border each year, these drivers say they will do their best to follow the new rules and keep the cargo rolling. From Tijuana, Matthew Bowler, KPBS News.
President Donald Trump has issued an executive order that attempts to restrict funding to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the CPB. The order says the CPB must cease funding to both NPR and PBS. Trump says neither entity presents a fair, accurate, or unbiased portrayal of current events to tax-paying citizens. PBS President and CEO Paula Kerger called it a blatantly unlawful executive order issued in the middle of the night. The CPB also shot back, saying it is not a federal agency subject to the president's authority. KPBS General Manager Deanna Mackey is joining us now to talk more about this. So, what is the most important thing you want the KPBS audience on radio, TV, online to know about this latest action?
Well, John, the biggest concern that we have is if we lose federal funding, that's money that we use to pay for our dues to PBS and NPR. So that means our children's programming that we provide that comes from PBS, the dramas, nature, science that so many people enjoy. It will be more difficult to pay for that if we could even pay for it at all. Additionally, on the NPR side, we have our national and international news. So this executive order is a concern despite the fact that the president doesn't have full authority over CPB. And we're also facing the rescission threat from the administration and the fact that the CPB funding has been taken out of the fiscal year 26 skinny budget that was just announced.
Obviously, in the public media space, we have known that something like this could be coming down the pike for some time now. What has KPBS been doing to prepare for the various scenarios that could take effect? What are we doing to prepare for that?
Well, we of course are being very careful with our budget and our planning as we begin our fiscal year 26 in July. That being said, we are in solid financial shape, and that's because I believe we have a service that this community cares about deeply and appreciates deeply, and they show that with the support they provide us. So currently we are being careful, but we are not stopping providing the local news that people appreciate, the engagement in events like One Book One San Diego, as well as the children's activities for San Diego's families.
And we won't stop.
We will not, no.
Do we know yet when we could hear more specifics about this, either on the local or national level?
Well, literally every day is a new day of news about federal funding for public media. So I expect by next week we will hear more from the CPB about how they are going to approach this executive order. And as the process for the 26 budget moves forward in the coming weeks and months, literally on a regular basis, we'll be finding out what to expect.
And you are in fairly consistent communication, I imagine, with your CEOs of stations across the country.
Yes, in fact, I just got back last night from a meeting where we had a discussion about what's happening, and I walked in my door last night at 8:30 and found out about the executive order. So it's literally day by day.
Wow, almost minute by minute.
Yes.
General Manager Deanna Mackey, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
I'm Amna Vaz. Tonight on the NewsHour, the resilience of the U.S. job market and what lies ahead for the economy. That's coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
A new safe parking site near San Diego International Airport is set to open in the coming weeks. Today, the city provided a preview of what the H Barracks site on Kincaid and McCain Road will look like. It'll provide 190 spaces to individuals, families, and seniors, nearly doubling the number of spaces program-wide. The site will only operate overnight. It's expected to remain open through 2029. The opioid abuse crisis in America goes hand in hand with a crisis of chronic pain, and finding alternatives to opioid medication is not easy. KPBS Sci-Tech reporter Thomas Fudge spoke with two people who are looking for other ways to provide relief.
About 10 years ago, Ana Moreno was a PhD student at UC San Diego when she had a free Sunday night and did what some serious students do. She started reading science papers.
I came across a paper that talked about these people in Pakistan, the street performers that could, walk on fire, do different performances with no pain whatsoever. And when they studied these people, they actually found that they have a mutation in their genome.
That story was the spark that led Moreno to try to imagine a gene therapy that would relieve chronic pain. Her personal life also inspired her. She remembers her vivacious aunt and godmother from when she was growing up in Mexico. Her aunt came down with trigeminal neuralgia, a nerve disorder that causes an intense stabbing pain to the head and the face.
I saw my aunt become, she was the life of the party. She went from that to someone that was, always in pain, and it's induced by eating, by showing, so there's no quality of life.
Moreno has founded a company called Navega Therapeutics to commercialize and test her patented gene therapy. She says it has shown good results in mice. Human clinical trials are 12 months away. In this treatment, you inject the shell of a virus into the body that carries a protein that changes gene expression. It turns off part of the DNA that allows pain impulses to travel along channels that lead to the brain.
And these sodium channels open and close depending on pain. So when they open, it's like an electrical shock, kind of like turning on the light. You start seeing this electrical signal. For example, when you touch something hot, it starts here. The sodium channel, the ion exchange goes through your arm, through your back to your brain. That's how you feel the pain. So we can turn it off in the spinal level, depending on where your pain is located.
Moreno began working on this pain relief model when the opioid addiction crisis started ramping up 10 years ago. Chronic pain and opioid use are part of my story also. Almost 20 years ago, I was in a serious traffic accident where I suffered traumatic brain injury. Ever since then, I've had chronic pain in the lower part of my body. I've tried lots of different ways to try to ease that pain: acupuncture, chiropractic, cannabis. But the only thing that really worked, and it worked every time, was opioid medication.
First of all, I'm sorry to hear of your pain and suffering, and you're not alone. There's so many people in this country going through this.
I spoke with Eric Garland, a professor in psychiatry at UC San Diego at the Sanford Institute for Empathy and Compassion.
And some people do quite well on the opioid. And there are other folks who, over time, because of side effects or because of the natural tolerance that develops to the drug, they may find that they're not getting the kind of relief that they want to get.
Health professionals estimate between 20 and 25% of people who are prescribed opiates end up with opioid use disorders, which include full-blown addiction. Garland says there are pain management alternatives, including those that I have tried. But even if they are going to work for you, it doesn't mean you'll have access to them or that your health insurance is going to cover them. Garland's research has focused on using mindfulness and meditation to address chronic pain. He says negative emotions that correspond with pain can make it more intense.
They turn up the volume of our pain and make pain hurt worse. And so there's a real need for therapies like mindfulness that can train the mind to be less emotionally reactive to pain, and that can actually turn down the volume of the pain in the brain.
One person who has used the mindfulness model is Dan Kruger, a professional motorcycle racer. He has suffered chronic pain for decades and been dependent on opiates, due in part to numerous injuries sustained on the racetrack. He worked with Garland, practiced meditation, and 3 years into therapy, he says things are much better.
My chronic pain is 25% less than it was while I was on opioids. So my chronic pain is lower. I have it, I have it right now as I speak to you, but it is absolutely manageable.
On the other hand, there are some patients who have relied on long-term use of opiates with minimal side effects. Some patients with chronic pain have formed a lobbying group called Don't Punish Pain to rally against new restrictions on opioid use. Thomas Fudge, KPBS News.
The way the Vietnam War ended 50 years ago has had a lasting impact on multiple generations of Vietnamese refugees. This final episode of Fall of Saigon at 50, Stories of Loss, Legacy, and Identity, takes a look at what it means to be Vietnamese today and how members of the diaspora can move forward without letting the war define them.
Being Vietnamese American and having immigrant parents, I think, is a really big part of my identity.
It was very difficult for my parents to understand the struggle that I was going through being Vietnamese in the 90s.
Immigrating to America definitely has been something that shaped all of us. The struggles that they had to go through, because they were like boat people. They came here on boats. That kind of trauma has just like stayed with them. As they tell me what they went through, I understand it a lot more. I felt like I was there, and it just really means a lot because of how surreal that feeling is, and how, I mean, I'm lucky enough to not experience it.
Being a kid and growing up like in Southern California, like a tragedy like that, like that's kind of, it feels unimaginable almost.
If my parents, my family had not left Vietnam, I wouldn't have like this deep of a connection with my culture. I think that when Saigon fell, a lot of people, a lot of citizens saw their country change in ways that they, couldn't control. And I think that because they saw their country, the country that they loved so much, crumble, they wanted to preserve it and keep it going with them wherever they went.
My family story is probably the #1 reason why I, one, joined the Army, and two, wanted to pursue a career in public service and in government today.
It was very difficult for my parents to understand the struggle that I was going through being Vietnamese in the 90s, because I wasn't American enough for them to consider me, one of their peers, but I wasn't Vietnamese enough to be considered, Vietnamese even at home, because every time I complained about something, they would compare it to what they went through to get here, or what they went through in Vietnam, or how life is so much better.
I feel like almost split, like there's like a part of me that's like Vietnamese and then American is separate, and I don't really know how to mesh the two together, because at home, like, I'm a little more involved in tradition and culture, and I try to lean into it more, but like going out to school every day and like seeing my friends, we just don't have that overlap in culture. I just wish that I had more Vietnamese friends in my area to like feel that connection to my identity.
I'm very glad to have grown up in San Diego as a Vietnamese American, because there is like a decent community of Vietnamese people here. I've thought about if I had lived in like a Midwest area or like somewhere else in California where there's less people of my like culture, I think it would have been a lot harder on me and for my family.
I definitely didn't understand the significance that the war played on my family members. Now hearing it as an adult now, it really feels like I was there living it, and like seeing what my parents had to go through, which like really hurts me just because they went through a lot.
I hope they do not have to go through what we went through, but it's still a good lesson for them to learn about the past and thrive in the future. But certainly, I do not want them to live or to went through what we did.
I think growing up, I felt like it was my responsibility to do well in school, to really honor their sacrifices. I even wrote about it in my personal statements for college. They sacrificed a lot, and I think they they saw going to the U.S. as an opportunity for a better future for me. Oftentimes they would say if we would have stayed in Vietnam, I wouldn't have the opportunity to go to college because my parents, my dad's involvement with the anti-war and anti-regime.
So I think my responsibility is a lot bigger to be able to make sure that, you know, future generations, other classmates, friends, peers can really learn about it, because I believe that having a connection to your culture is very important.
Our responsibility is definitely to keep the traditions going, honoring our ancestors during Lunar New Year, keep the dances going, the singing, the music, the food.
I hope that the path forward would be further exploration, understanding of the rich culture and heritage of Vietnam and history of it as well, because I think it would be really sad to be lost.
I think the path forward, you know, in the diaspora and healing is conversation, is talking to each other, but really listening to each other, and not be doing our best to not be combative, but healing from the past, where I think that it's a very important, just like in anything, we should know our history, you know?
The more that we can get that first generation to open up, to tell their stories, just to start speaking, to start talking, we have to unearth some of that history and their stories as really critical parts of how we can move forward. Because when those things are buried, when they're gone, I have a friend whose father just passed away, and she has a lot of regret over stories that she didn't get to hear from him, you know?
So there's not many future moments to commemorate this occasion with them. I think the future of Black April and Fall of Saigon commemorations will continue to honor everyone who was lost and displaced because of the war before us, but it also has to be forward-looking as well. It has to take the lessons from the war. It has to take the lessons from the plight of all these boat refugees, the plight of my grandfather, my mother, and extend that to how we treat people, events, and wars in the future, and the wars that are ongoing today.
Reporter Alexander Nguyen produced this excellent series. That story is the final part of a 4-part video series called Fall of Saigon at 50, Stories of Loss, Legacy, and Identity. You can watch the entire series online at kpbs.org or the KPBS YouTube page.
Well, we are dealing with a pretty active pattern. This time of the year, we typically step into the dry season. One final stretch of wet weather here. And this is kind of nice to see some late season moisture. The wet season's last stand over the next few days. Cool with some showers. We'll see under 1/10 of an inch of rain near the coast, under 1/4 inch of rain for the mountains. The absolute highest peaks will see a little bit of snow out there. But for most of us here, just some low clouds returning tonight, 60 for your low. And really, this is beneficial moisture. It's just nice to get a little bit more before the faucet totally shuts off and the dry season rolls in. So this area of low pressure is going to drift inland. Showers for us. Again, we're not saying straight up rain. We're intentional about the phrasing here. Showers is going to be limited. And we'll get something out there with some occasional light rain, and it should be measurable, just a few hundredths of an inch as we step deeper into the weekend. Clouds thicken, though, for Saturday. We'll see a little bit of sun linger a little longer farther east, and you'll notice that as we step into the weekend here, that here comes the moisture. A lot of the more robust rain showers and mountain snow will be to the north. Again, we're really not seeing a whole lot of green in the area, but into Sunday afternoon and evening, that's probably our greatest chance for some actual showers to pivot through the region. Monday, unusually cool for this time of the year as this drifts east. Still Tuesday, our upper level low pressure system is going to be just on our doorstep to the east, gradually easing away, but that will still hold the cool air in place for a lot of us here for a little bit longer. So for the coast, you can see low clouds. Best chance for actual showers will roll in on Sunday. As we step ahead into the inland areas, again, the best chance for showers late Saturday night into Sunday. gradually turning warmer back into the low 70s for Tuesday into Wednesday. In the mountains, here we have a mix of rain and some snow. In the highest elevations on Sunday, low clouds and cool for Monday. And in the deserts, here it's a gradual warming trend. After a warm Saturday, we cool down Sunday, and there's the gradual warming trend that will follow. So a big change, windy and cooler into Sunday and Monday. For AccuWeather, I'm Jeff Cornish for KPBS News.
A dozen military veterans are running across the country to raise money for mental health and wellness. KPBS military and veterans reporter Andrew Dyer was at the starting line this morning.
This casing today connects our mission to that same tradition of service and sacrifice ahead of this team's mission to move the flag across this great country of ours.
From the flight deck of the USS Midway Museum, a single American flag starts its journey across the country. 12 veterans will take turns carrying it in what they're calling an ultra relay.
I feel like I've been training for this my whole life. If you think about it, like I've been putting in at least running 6 days a week, I would say.
Lindsay Casso is a Marine Corps veteran who lives in Temecula, but for the next 2 weeks or so, she'll be running on the night shift of the relay.
My role is just moving the flag forward. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to raise awareness to the veterans and mental health, physical health, just getting up, getting moving. And we're trying to raise $1 million. It's our goal.
The veterans are split into 3 shifts, so someone will always be moving the flag along. They'll each run about 15 miles a day at around a 7-minute mile pace. The relay is organized by Team Red, White, and Blue, a nonprofit that works to help veterans lead healthier lives.
We're trying to bring a community, basically, building a community, bridging the gap between active duty and becoming a veteran. As soon as you get out, sometimes you feel alone.
The relay is already working its way across California. It'll finish in about 15 days in Washington, D.C. Andrew Dyer, KPBS News.
You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. I'm John Carroll. Have an excellent evening and a wonderful weekend.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit BillHowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.